In this video, we're going to make collision objects out of the boots. When we last left off, we had finished making a cache of our collision body. Up here we have our boots. Let's go ahead and add a convert node. And then following that convert node, we're going to add a time shift because we're going to remesh these boots and we're going to need to drive them with a point deformer. So we'll time shift, and as we did last time on our time shift, Alt E, we'll go ahead and do F start here as our first frame, accept. Okay, so this is going to be our first frame. It takes us back to the starting point, so I'll just go ahead and reset the timeline and get to this position here. I am going to paint some attributes on these boots, so I'm going to go ahead and insert my attribute paint node right now. And just leave it there for now because I will come back to it. Next, we're going to go ahead and want to chop these boots up. I want to get rid of some of these extra pieces that are definitely cloth snaggers right here if they're not soft. And if they're not soft in vellum sims, then I really don't need them, so they're not an integral part. So let's go ahead and chop them. Just going to select these points, or these faces, and I'm just going to grow with Shift G till I get there, and I'm just going to hit delete. And that'll create my first blast node. I'm going to put this in a subnet like last time called cuts. And I will go inside here and continue my work. I also want to get rid of these S4, scrap that, just grow until I get all connected pieces, and then I also hit delete, which adds another blast node. Sometimes the paint node leaves it purple for a while, so you have to go up a node and you have to select the node before and after, and then you have to select the node before again sometimes and then dive back in. That should free you up, free your visualizer up. So these points are all over the board here. If you go inside the boot here, there's a solid piece inside of another piece inside of another piece. So there's a lot of ridiculous geometry here. Let's go ahead and get rid of these as well. S4, select that piece as well as these pieces over here, Shift G, and then delete. So we've got pretty much smooth pieces now at this point. Let's go ahead and do a polyfill because we've got to fill in the top and whatever's on the inside. Polyfill. Okay, we'll go with the default values for now, see what we get. We have some pieces sticking out here that's not desirable, so let's start trying to figure out which is a good fill mode. Triangles looks like a good one. We can do that. Let's see if there's another one. Triangle fan. Triangle fan looks like it's poking out here. There's an offset, so we'll just make the offset 0. Yeah, there we go. That looks pretty good. Now, these points are not fitting together very well, so if I do a remesh on this now, it's going to cause some problems. So I'm going to fuse these, which is going to kind of drive all of the points that are nearby to each other and kind of start fusing it. And then it's going to become a manifold mess, this entire piece of geometry here. So let's just, this is an exponential level here, so let's see if we get some points fused here. That looks pretty ugly. That looks really good and really ugly all at the same time. Maybe 0.05. I don't know, I'm going to remesh it anyway, so yeah, maybe that'll work. Just leave it there. Just add a remesh. See what we can get. We can smooth this out with some painted attributes here in a minute. Whoa, that doesn't look good. These default values. 0.01. There we go. That looks pretty good. Nice first try. Okay, so some of these edges down here are going to be kind of sharp. Maybe define some areas. We might add a smooth in here, so I'm just going to put a little null for out here and then hook it up. Oh, okay, color it black, just standard. So I'm going to go up here and paint an area where I want it to be smooth, basically the heels down here and then maybe along the sides a little bit. Let's smooth that out. Well, let's leave the sides, but let's smooth out the heels. So under the paint attributes, I'm going to change the mask attribute to smooth area. And I'm going to start adding the name of the object in front of it, smooth. Just in case, because when we start merging these things up, it's gonna get kind of crazy. So let's see if I can add some symmetry across the x-axis here, and I'm going to use my scroll wheel. Used to be shift mouse drag, but not so much anymore. Don't know if it's painting. Yes, it is. So I'm going to paint the flat areas, And you don't have to worry if you get some of these flaps. You're like, hey, did we blast those out? Yes, we did. This is upstream. So we'll just paint some of this area here. Just see if we can get some smoothing action out of it. Great, so we don't have some heels. Okay. Now that we have the boot smooth attribute, it's a point attribute, so let's go ahead and promote it to a primitive attribute, because that's what we're going to need later for our smooth nodes. So we're just going to type in adder promote, ATPR is all you need to type, and it should come up. And this is boot smooth. It's a point value. We're going to make it a primitive attribute now. We can go ahead and delete the original so we don't carry extra data down the way. And this will come through here, and then now down here we type in a smooth node, plop it in, and we're going to take advantage of, there's no actual group, but we can create an on-the-fly group saying add boot smooth, not booth, boot smooth is greater than 0.1, right? And let's see if this just limits it to this heel. Originally I was going to make this a vellum object, and I wanted to make sure it was nice and smooth and was going to kind of flop around, but that ended up being a lot of work, and all I could do to keep it together was almost make it as rigid as possible. So I ended up scrapping that idea and going with a collision groups avoidance in general with that. And what I mean by that is I wanted the capes to collide with everything, but I wanted other things to not collide with things. So I didn't want the tip of this boot to collide with the flaps that were dangling down here, because at frame 1036 that is a big problem for me in this particular sim. So if I go there and go above the time shift, you can actually see what I'm talking about. You can see this point right here. So I've decided that I'm going to paint these areas. There's going to be two areas on this boot, a no collide area and a collide area. So we're going to go back to our attribute paint node. Go back here, and we're going to paint a new attribute called no collide. And let's go ahead and paint that. We're going to paint this at the bottom here. And I kind of want it to collide nowhere below this little wrinkly area. So let's go ahead, and I don't want it to be soft. I want it to be off or on. So the soft edge is off. I'm going to scroll wheel myself back up, and I'm just going to paint everything collide or no collide. I wanted it to be a clear delineation of points here, so that on frame 1036 I don't have to deal with this issue. And this is how we're going to deal with this issue. Down below here, once we get here, we're going to add our point wrangle that we're going to use to define all of our points, like I said before. So we're going to define our collision groups. So in this one, we're going to say if f at no collide, just making sure that's right, is greater than 0.9, which means if it is completely red, we are going to say the collision group, the string add collision group, is equal to, and I came up with this idea that the bottom of your boots are muddy and the other parts are clean, so I'm just going to call it muddy and clean. You could call it whatever you want, muddy, else. Otherwise, if it's the other part of your body, if it's the other part of the boot, we will copy this and just call it clean. So I'm just going to copy this line here. Just tab it in, and this is clean. So this will represent the upper part. And later we will be able to just tell certain parts you can't collide with those parts. So this will be clean, a clean part of the boot. And then we got to set our integer and attribute. So I at boots, I keep doing boots, equals 1. There we go. Zoom. And let's go ahead and go all the way down here and see our final piece of geometry. And now we have to wrap deform this as part of my rule. If I change the point count of anything, I want to wrap deform it. Okay. The geometry you want to deform goes in the first. The next one is the rest state, which is the output right after the time shift, and then the matching moving deforming cage, which is right above. So this should give us deformations as we see fit. So if I go to Alt F, we do see our boots following in suit here. Just going to lower this value because of earlier. I don't suspect, they're pretty far apart from each other, so I don't suspect that they're going to pull on each other, but just in case. Okay, so in our geometry spreadsheet we have a muddy group and we have a clean group, which we will pass along later. We have a no collide group and a collide group. We have boots. Everything is boots. Lots of data here. Let's go ahead and put a null out here, null, and this will be out boots. And maybe maybe it's boots collision geometry. So I might have some. I want to be more descriptive, and we'll color that black. All right, and I'll drag it down here so it's sort of at the same parallel level as the other geometry here. And we want to probably create a group that we can share with this. So I'll create another merge, where we can just merge everything here. So we'll take the boots and the body, and we'll create another null, and this will be our collision all. So we'll call it call all. Okay, so now we have every single collision object, and if we look at the view of this now, we should see a full body with fixes here. So don't worry, I'll show you how to do the no collide here for this, because otherwise we would have to add this to the volume issue, but I don't want this. I want these to stay full volume. That should be a good base setup for collision objects at this point. We can go back and modify these as our setup requires.